I'm about to meet Federico Marchetti, who is probably most well known for the big merger of YOOX, I think that's how you say it, with Net-a-Porter, and so is very famous for basically putting fashion on the internet and changing the way we consume fashion. The reason why I really want to have Federico Marchetti on Innovators Making a Difference is because he is passionate about the future of innovation in fashion. He is doing so much to encourage the next generation of people within fashion from both a design point of view and as entrepreneurs and leaders in fashion. And he does so much to encourage gender parity, sustainability. He's passionate about the climate, and he is using his major influence in the world of fashion to improve and change the way we consume fashion and other lifestyle enhancing businesses to push us all in a much more sustainable direction. So can't wait to meet him. Federico, it is so lovely to meet you. Thank you for taking the time to speak with me. I gave you a general introduction, but I don't think I did you justice, given how influential you are in the world of fashion and innovation. So do you want to give yourself a bit of a summary as to what is really your absolute main focus at the moment when it comes to the world of innovation and fashion?
Okay, so very quickly, when I left my company that I've created, YOOX, and then I bought Net-a-Porter, so I created the group YOOX Net-a-Porter that was acquired by Richemont in early 2018. So after that, I started thinking about my future. And given that I've been always passionate about sustainability in the sense of climate change, I decided that that was my future, and now it's also my present, because I have the honor to help the Sustainable Markets Initiative founded by King Charles III on sustainability, and especially on sustainability in fashion. So I lead this task force where the members range from Armani to Chloé to Burberry, Cucinelli, etc. So basically it's very an international task force. And I'm trying basically to put at His Majesty's service, all my expertise in innovation in order to accelerate the path of the fashion industry towards sustainability. That's more or less the point. I do it pro bono and I do it with pleasure.
I think that's what really drew me to your work, because there's such a strong sense of your passion in what you're doing to really nurture future leaders in fashion. That's the sense I get from an innovative perspective, because you have started let me get your titles of your roles are very long, but you have a coalitions group called Champions of Change, one of your many roles, and this to me was where I really focused in on what you're doing, because Champions of Change seems to really support people who are underrepresented. Mm-hmm. And I mean, even within your executive board, you have 50-50 gender parity between men and women. And
yeah, we're talking about the past, though. So what I was explaining to you is the present and the future. About the past, we can spend a lot of money. We can spend a lot of time, a lot of money. We can spend a lot of time discussing the past. And yes, I was among the founding members of the Champions of Change, which is a coalition to bring technology into new industries, into different industries. And I've been a mentor many young entrepreneurs, especially coming from underrepresented areas. which is something that I continue to do when I have time. Let's put it this way.
Okay, so getting extremely current right now, sustainability seems to be at the heart of what you do. And you've been described as someone who put fashion on the internet. What are your key focuses right now? Because the thing is, what you are involved in has so many layers of complexity. There are so many challenges that you are addressing. So how do you describe your focus?
My focus is on sustainability and innovation together. Because my belief is that probably only technology can save this planet from the global warming and all the climate issues. Talking about technology, talking about innovation, so like new processes, new technologies, new ways of doing the same thing but in a different way. And that's what I'm bringing to the Fashion Task Force of His Majesty. I think I put together this task force from his request, I think almost 3 years ago. And we've accomplished a lot of actions and a lot of concrete projects. Because I mean, the most important thing about the task force that I have the honor to chair is about action and is about doing things. So we are doers and we're not talkers, because I'm an entrepreneur and entrepreneurs love to do things. So we're not politicians, we're not institutions. And so from the very beginning, I put action at the heart of this task force. And I have to say that in almost 3 years, 2 years and a half of activity, we've managed basically to do so many things. And probably the best thing to tell you what I'm currently doing is to give you some examples, because usually, like, from examples, people understand much better what people do. So one example is when I was at YOOX Net-a-Porter, the company that I founded as a group, I started to experiment the digital passport in our private labels. And I'm talking about 2017, 16, something like that. So we had Mr. P, which was the private label of Mr. Porter, which was one of our brands, websites, apps, and etc. And I came up with the idea to put a barcode in this private label, because we were responsible for the whole supply chain of the private label, because it was our own label and not Gucci or Prada. And in order to give all the information to the customers, which they've always been at basically my priority. You know, when I founded YOOX in year 2000, I always thought about what to give to the customers in terms of newness, in terms of innovation, in terms of creativity, in terms of surprise. So I brought the vintage, I brought the young designers, etc., etc. And so this was the first experiment about the digital passport. When I started to chair and to lead the Fashion Task Force, I thought that the digital passport was something very important, an innovation in a way, or at least a technological tool, which can be through blockchain, could be through QR code, could be through NFC, anything. But it's an innovation to bring transparency to the customers, to bring information. And the power of information, we all know how important it is, especially nowadays. And then I started to give this dream to all the members, and they all dream about this digital passport. I'm talking about, it was 2021, July 2021, when we kicked off the Fashion Task Force. And everybody said, yes, let's do it, let's implement it. And so we brought it to the G20 in Rome with the presence of His Majesty. And then I immediately started the implementation process, because differently from the institutions and the politicians, our approach is exactly the opposite. So we start now, and then we adjust and we make it better and better, rather than saying we need to do it by 2030, we need to do it by 2015. Because the risk of saying we need to do it by 2030 and we need to do it by 2050 is that you start working too late, which unfortunately I think is exactly the current situation. So we take the opposite approach, a more entrepreneurial approach, and say, okay, we do it. It won't be perfect. It won't be great. It won't be on everything. It won't be in every region of the world. It won't be on each item of the collection. But at least we start. And that's exactly what we did. And so like all the members, they've already implemented a pilot in less than a couple of years. And they are basically rolling it out on the whole collection. And so we have an implementation plan that will take a few years, of course, because it's a complex thing to do, because you need to basically also rebuild the supply chain sometimes. But we are all on track. And so that's innovation applied to the fashion industry in order to bring the customers up to speed about all the materials that they're used in the supply chain, how to resell the item, how to repair the item, how to give basically a circularity compared to a linearity, how to recycle it, because I mean very, very, very few items are recycled in the fashion industry. And so basically it's a way also to give longevity, durability to a fashion item, which in the end is the most important thing if you want to avoid the waste, the waste of the fast fashion that is basically just changing item all the time, every week, every month, every season. If you keep the same fashion item for 1 year, or 2 years, or 5 years, or 10 years, because of the highest quality, because of the best materials and so on, obviously you don't pollute the environment as much as if you change it every week. And so, and that's what one of the things that we're doing, but we're doing so many other things in regenerative agriculture. We're doing so with Cucinelli, we invented a project on the Himalayas to basically to start producing regenerative cashmere, and also to give jobs to the local population that previously they were nomads and now they're coming back. And we found out that the cashmere that we created by planting more than 1 million trees was of the highest quality ever. So they are going to use it in the production. They're going to use it to make sweaters, and etc., etc. So it's changing, and we love the change. We love the pace of the change, and we love the change itself. So that's one of the things that I'm doing. And then, as you have seen from the different titles. For the King, I'm also like in the board of trustees of the King's Foundation. I'm in the board of I'm a member of the board of Highgrove Gardens, where His Majesty makes also sustainable food and many other things. So I'm let's say I'm a passionate sustainability advocate for the King, more or less.
Yeah, I mean, these initiatives that you are running and founded are just so powerful, and they're tackling the problem in a really effective way, using technology. And I think that's where our interests overlap, because technology excites me, the actual kind of mechanics of it and the science of it, and the fact that you are applying these tools to a very creative world where most people have always viewed fashion as something unsustainable and fast and trending and not conscious. So you're bringing consciousness to a world that typically has been less conscious, and you're using technology to create that difference.
Yeah, I have to say that, I mean, I've been a kind of an outsider of the fashion industry for many, many years, because as I told you, I founded my first venture called YOOX, that was basically website. Actually, it was already sustainable in 2000 because we started by selling end of season products. So in order to give a second life to end of season. So it was already like, even if it was not my idea around sustainability at the time, it was more a business model. So I must admit it. I cannot take the credit to be sustainable from year 2000, but it was something really sustainable because if you give a second life, we go back to my comment before about longevity. And so I've been around fashion since the year 2000 as an outsider, first by founding YOOX, and then I bought Net-a-Porter in 2015. It was a big thing, obviously, especially for the UK, where Net-a-Porter is based. And then, etc., etc., etc. So, in a way, I have to say that compared to year 2000 when I started working with fashion brands, with luxury brands, things have changed so much. So there is this consciousness. Yeah. So I cannot take the credit and say, okay, I'm bringing consciousness to the fashion industry because it's not true. So currently, all the CEOs, members of my task force, they were absolutely ready to go and to try to do as much as possible in order to change, in order to become more sustainable and to hurt the least as possible the climate and the environment. But sometimes they didn't know how to do it, especially when it comes to technology and innovation, because technology and innovation is not necessarily the strength of the fashion industry, as we know. No? So, for example, in e-commerce, you mentioned before that I've been credited by the New York Times as the man who brought fashion on the net in an article, because before 2000 they were not doing any e-commerce, and then I started with them. I taught them how to do it also, and now most of them, they're doing it by themselves. And the same story will happen with sustainability. So, for example, with the digital passport, they needed someone to tell them how to do it, what are the pros and cons, so what is the path, what is the right technology, the challenges, because there are many challenges. And also, like within the task force, there's a lot of collaboration and a lot of transparency amongst the brands. So they share information, they say what is working, what is not working, which is also like an incredible story for the fashion industry, because usually in the fashion industry there's a lot of competitiveness, and not collaboration, the opposite. But it's working. It's working because we're talking about something where they know that they're not strong. And so they rely on my expertise of over 20 years in innovation in the fashion industry in order to give them a hand. That's all. So, but they were ready. It's not my. I cannot say that it's coming from me.
I don't know. I really. I just see you as someone that brought together so many cogs of the machine. You know, so many cogs needed to start moving together. And I see you as someone that brought all of those cogs together, and now they're turning. The gears are turning.
Yes.
And it's really powerful because there has been for so long, even when it comes to climate, there's been so many ideas.
In a word, I'm connecting the dots.
Exactly.
So that's what I'm doing. No more than that.
Yeah. But the
dots were already there.
Yeah. But the difference between the dots existing and being connected is, I mean, it's a paradigm shift. You know, it's really, I think this is why, this podcast is called Innovators Making a Difference, because so many different innovations need to exist, but you're really an innovator making a difference because these innovations are moving into action rather than just existing. I mean, as someone on the technology side, many technologies exist that never actually create an impact because they're brilliant and they've had investment and they create change, but they're not actually implemented. So actually you're an implementer making a difference.
But the reason is because I'm an entrepreneur, and entrepreneurs, they used to implement things. So also when I was in my previous company and my previous group, I was experimenting, but things that they were useful for the customers and not useful for only the technological team or only for communication and marketing. I couldn't care less about that. I wanted to give the customer something useful. Yeah. And so I'm coming from that background. And so, after so many years doing the same story over and over, people don't change. And that's why I continue to do that innovation and implementation together.
And I think that's an inspiring aspect of your approach, because all of this technology is happening, all of this innovation is happening, but ultimately it is driven by the consumer. Mm-hmm. Because consumers, I'm old enough to know a time when we just wanted that bag or that pair of shoes or that piece of jewelry, and we didn't care how it got there. We just needed to have it because it gave us a sense of something that we were searching.
The 80s, the 90s.
Yeah, right. But today, so many consumers are really aware of the environment and damage to our futures if we continue the way we have done in the past. And I think that is because of the message that current generations have been receiving through their lifetimes about the problems that we're facing with climate. And so the way younger people want to consume has changed compared to the 80s and 90s. And that is encouraging the uptake of the innovations that you are making possible.
Absolutely. And
consumers are ready. I think what I'm saying is consumers are ready, not just CEOs and entrepreneurs.
Consumers are almost ready because, for example, many times they complained that they didn't have the information to make responsible choices. So they didn't know if exactly that item was sustainable or not sustainable, which is still the same. So with the digital passport, we are just filling this gap between not having the information and giving the information to the customers. And so I think obviously, like all the revolutions come from the bottom, and I think that's why I insisted so much and I experimented a long time ago, and now with the fashion task force, about empowering the customers with the right information in order to make choices, because then there are no more excuses. So if in 5 years, all the fashion brands, including even fast fashion, that I don't know exactly how they can do it, but they will for survival, they will have the digital passport. And each customer getting into the boutique with the phone will know everything about that item. That obviously will be full transparency of the supply chain, and there will be no more excuses about I don't know if it's sustainable or not sustainable, and I think that's the final goal now, to reach 100% in 5 or 6 or 4 years. I don't know exactly how long it is going to take, but that's the final goal. And I think it will be, in the end, it will be a question of survival for the brands. It's not an opportunity anymore. It's a survival thing, a survival of the greenest, in a way. So that's what's going to happen. There's going to be the survival of the greenest. And they all know that with the young generation, I mean, that's the only way they can continue to operate.
Oh, it's so exciting. I wanted to clarify, because blockchain, for example, you can track the life cycle of a product, whereas the passport is different in the sense that you're actually changing practices as a result of this passport existing. So if there is a process in the chain of events, in the chain of life cycle events, you can say this is not good practice and this needs to change.
Yeah, but also with the blockchain, actually the digital passport can be also implemented through a blockchain. So in the end, as I said, it's data and transparency about all the different steps from, let's say, the the material itself, where it's coming from. So is it coming from regenerative agriculture? Is coming from biodiversity, 1 million trees planted, soil without any fertilizers, until the very, very end of the supply chain, which is where it's sold in the boutiques, how do they operate, which electricity, with the renewable energy, and so on. So, I mean, it's a full spectrum that you can have on. That's why it's a very complex challenge.
Yeah.
And that's why it's gonna take a few years to complete. But if you don't start now, then you're gonna be late. And that's more or less the message that I pass to my members.
Yeah, sustainability is a word that I've heard all throughout my career. It's become more and more popular, and more recognized and understood, or at least we're familiar with this word now. But we are becoming so familiar with the word sustainability that it almost goes over our heads. And now I find that the word sustainability tends to be replaced with words like repurposing, reuse, reimagining, and affixing. You know, it's kind of, and also I feel like the word sustainability almost equals honesty. You know, people are having to get honest about the way in which
It
they
could be, could be sustainability, could be responsibility, it could be so many things. But in the end, the problem is the climate change. So I don't know how to say different. So all the wording is important, especially for marketing and communication. But in the end, the core of the problem, everybody knows what is the core of the problem, no? Like all the things that are happening every season that never happened before. So I think the wording is...
It does require us, whether we're consumers or in industry, it does require us to have a mental shift in the way we do things. I mean, all this repurposing.
Oh yes, no, absolutely. I agree with you, because I mean, I'm basically focused on the fashion industry because it's the industry that I know the most. But in everyday life, I think each one of us is responsible for our own actions. And so I don't know, I mean, from the very, very simple thing, like, I don't know, which is ridiculous even to mention, but the plastic bottles. I don't go to conferences where I see in the panel that there are plastic bottles. I don't sit anymore on those panels. I say sorry, but and then like the time after that thing, they never put plastic bottles. Or, I mean, renewable energy. I mean, I think in order to change, each one of us needs to do something. From the smallest thing that we can do, because, I mean, many people say, oh my God, what can I do in my life if there are many countries that they pollute like crazy? This is not a good argument. The argument is, what can you do yourself in order to change? And I think each one of us is responsible for our own actions, from the smallest to the biggest. So from the President of the United States to the normal citizen living in an island outside of, around Italy. So I think that's the most important message.
On that note, I do a lot of work around inclusion and diversity, because as a woman qualified in engineering, there were just no people like me when I graduated.
I imagine.
Yeah, it was a shock to the system. Yeah, well,
for making the effort.
Well, you know, it's interesting that you say that, because it ties in with what you said about the littlest things we can do. Because, you know, I, as a result of this strange experience of feeling very different from most people, I built up the sort of strength and courage and maybe even resilience to find my voice. So I wanted to get your perspectives on finding your voice, because you are very influential in what you do. And I think influence is only possible when you really have a strong sense of what you can contribute, and that can be any one of us, you know, in finding the difference we can make, whoever we are. And I know that there are too many roles that you have that actually encourage people to find their voice and really apply their values.
I think you use the right word, is values. No, in the end, it's values, and where the values are coming from, many of them from the education, to say, no, from the parents and so on. So other from schools, but education is very important. And in my previous career, obviously, like I'm not saying, you mentioned before champions of change, and you mentioned before also like in the executive team 50% were women and 50% were men. Absolutely true. And I can add also equal pay for men and women. So it was like a very modern company, and the way it should be. But it was not an effort for me to do like that. It was my value. It was something, I have to say, something normal. And I think that's the most important thing. It needs to become a normality and not an exception. And I have a daughter, which helps also maybe to remind me all the values all the time, because she's 12, almost 13 in July. And thank goodness she's very strong on this part of women, diversity, and so on. So I think it's important. And again, like for sustainability and climate change, the young people will be the driving force of the change. Because I'm sure that when my daughter will be 30, will be very different, thank goodness, from now. In Italy, we live in a country that probably is still sometimes a little bit behind in terms of diversity, I have to say. But I think we're catching up at the same time. I think we're catching up with the speed, hopefully.
I mean, as a British person living in Europe, essentially, what I can see is that we in the West are very aware of the importance of inclusion and diversity. Whether we're achieving it or not is a different story, but there's certainly an awareness.
It will take more time, but the trajectory is there, which is great news for everybody.
So for anyone who may be listening, who comes from a background where they are curious about getting into technologies that support sustainability, or they're curious about getting into design and fashion, or whichever direction people are coming from, what would you say to them who dream of having the kind of empowerment that you are achieving? Because I really do believe that anyone can make change. They just need to believe it in themselves. So what would you say to those people?
I think, when I started in 2000 to become an entrepreneur, even if it was my dream since I was a teenager, but in the end, I came back from my MBA at Columbia University, and I came up with the business plan of bringing fashion into e-commerce. That was more or less my idea. In a way, a very simple idea now. No? If you think now, you would say very easy. But if you think that I started to draft my business plan in 1999, when there was no Instagram, there was no Twitter, there was no Amazon in Italy, it was just selling a bunch of books in America since 3-4 years. There was nothing. There was no fiber optic, no 5G, not even 3G.
Yeah.
There was nothing. So probably at that time it was a kind of quite, let's say, a dream. And but it worked. And now with patience and hard work and resilience, as you mentioned before, we managed to basically bring many brands online for the first time in their own life. Now, they did many brands like British, French, Italian. And, they did their online debut with me, with my company. And so at that time, e-commerce and fashion was, let's say, a good thing to do for an entrepreneur, because I was among the first, and there was no competition, and there was a big land to conquer, and with the super high growth and so on. Now, I would say probably now it's not the time anymore, because the industry is mature, the growth has been slowing down, of course, and there are many competitors, and it's tough and tougher and so on. So if you don't have the right leadership, if you don't have the right differentiation strategies, because unfortunately now all the fashion websites, they all look the same. They carry all the same brands, they look the same. There's no differentiation, which I think is still a super important thing if you want to be the leader. Now, I think for the young and future entrepreneurs, which again is what I feel I am, an entrepreneur, not young anymore, but still an entrepreneur. I would suggest that there's this magic intersection between innovation and sustainability that basically in 2024 is you can invent companies, and you can find money from venture capitalists, and you can think big in this magic intersection of sustainability and innovation together, as much as in 2000 I did between e-commerce and fashion. So 24 years later, I think that if I were younger and again, to start a new company, I would do it in that intersection, because there's a lot of money coming from venture capitalists, and again, you can invent so many things in order to make the world better, and also in order to make sustainable business models. So that's my suggestion that I can give to young people that they want to become entrepreneurs. And talking about Italy, now before I said that. Compared to UK or America and so on, probably we are catching up in terms of diversity. At the same time, Italy has many strengths, not only disadvantages. And so, for example, I find myself as an Italian, I studied abroad, I worked abroad. My family is Anglo-Italian because my wife is British, and so I'm an Italian, but I don't necessarily eat spaghetti, and I watch soccer all the time. But I think Italians, they have also some advantages which I leveraged on in terms of creativity and innovation together. So being an Italian helped me a lot to put the two worlds of business and innovation together with creativity. I'm not talking about the Renaissance. I'm not talking about the same speech that many Italians do about Leonardo, etc., etc. But I think it's part of our culture, because we love art as much as science, and to put together the two things is not something that it usually comes natural to people. And so I think on this I would like to defend my country in terms of being an inspiration for me.
Honestly, when I visited Florence recently, the Renaissance and this real merger of arts and science is just so mind-changing.
Imagine for example, talking about Florence. I'm sure that you went to the Dome, to see the Dome, the big, how do you say, cupola, couple. How do you call it, the cupola of the Dome?
I think we just say cupola.
cupola. Okay, the big cupola. It was made by Brunelleschi. Brunelleschi was an architect, and it was the biggest cupola of the world. Nobody had invented something like so big, and the only way he could do it, after so many challenges, so many no's, you cannot do it, you cannot do it, you cannot do it, is because he invented the mobile scaffolding. So it was innovation. It was, in a way, it was technology of that time. So mobile scaffolding in order to make it so big. And then after Brunelleschi, many other artists used the mobile scaffolding, including for the Sixtine Chapel in the Vatican. So in the end, you see, art and science are together. And I think I mean, we have many weaknesses, but at least we have a few strengths.
Well, I am so honored that you took the time to speak with me today, because what you represent for me is someone who is connecting all these dots, and it's got nothing to do with borders and nationalities and race, or none of those categories, none of those kind of differentiating labels. To me, you represent someone who really unites ideas and industries and capabilities, and in doing so, you are allowing your vision, because you are visionary, to actually become a reality. And that is so powerful to me. And so, I mean, this is so essential for progress and advancement. And you do that, you make that possible. So for me, it's been an absolute privilege to be able to speak with you. Thank you so much for what you're doing.
Thank you. It was my honor to speak with you.
In a world of fashion, which is not my world, even though obviously as a woman I can appreciate it, but in the world of fashion, the amount of technologies that you are bringing into your sphere allows technologies to have this ripple effect into other industries. So it's just beyond powerful. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It was my honor to speak with you, and continue to inspire girls to become engineers, because it's important. We need more engineers.
I agree.